let's switch over to the lesson page and work on other buttons, such as previous and next lesson buttons. So those buttons are supposed to work in the following way. The previous button is going to redirect us to the previous lesson page, and the next button is supposed to redirect us to the next lesson page. We're firstly going to work on the backward button. So right here, I'm going to reference the proper address of the lesson page by using route function. And since we are about to be redirected to the previous lesson, we're going to reference previous lesson right here. But the problem is that the previous property is not defined yet. So in this lesson, let's see how we can make it work. I would like to implement this behavior in such a way so that whenever we have a lesson model, we can easily retrieve previous and the next lesson by simply referencing corresponding properties, like so. And we're going to make it work with the help of so-called accessor methods. Let's see how they work. So I'm going to switch over to lesson.php, and in here, let's define the method with the name previous. This is going to be our accessor, and the accessor is a special method which we're going to reference as a property on this model. It allows us to run some extra logic to retrieve additional data related to the current model. Even though the previous column does not exist on the lesson table, but accessors allow us to define extra attributes which might not exist on particular table. So we're defining an accessor in the following way. Let's call method make on the attribute class, which takes an argument named get. This is supposed to be the callback, where we're going to describe the logic that should be run when we're gonna reference previous accessor. So since we need to retrieve the previous lesson of this particular lesson, I'm going to firstly grab the course to which this current lesson belongs to, and then let's reference lessons relationship to retrieve all the lessons of this particular course. And since we need to get only the one previous lesson, we have to add where clause that we will use to filter result set by the number colon on the lessons table. And just because we know the number of this particular lesson, it will be easy to determine the previous lesson. We can simply subtract 1 from the number of the current lesson, and this way we're going to fetch the previous lesson. And by the way, first where method is kind of a shortcut, which at the same time adds where clause and also executes this query. Before testing this out in the browser, let's open up Tinker and run the following statement. I'm going to reference lessons relationship on the course model and then apply one restriction. We're going to use number column to filter result set and get only that lesson where the number column will contain value 2. And to run this query, don't forget to call method first to get only one particular record from the table. And whenever you are confused and curious to see what query will be eventually generated by the query builder, you can always reference dd method at the end of this method call chain to get the generated SQL statement. As you can see right here, we have this select statement where we filter out result set by the course ID because we need to get all the lessons that belong to a particular course, and at the same time we're also applying the constraint by the number column because we have specified earlier that we need to get only the lesson where number column is equal to 1. And just like I have said before, if we have where method call as well as first method call going in a row, we can combine these two calls into one by calling first where method, and we're going to get the same result. This is just a convenient shortcut to apply where clause as well as execute query at the same time by using one method call. So now that we have defined this previous accessor, it's time to check in the browser how this is going to work. And right away we're getting this error. It is related to the fact that currently we are located at the first lesson page, which does not really have any previous lesson. So we're getting this error, but the moment we're going to switch to another lesson page, which is not going to be the first one. In this case, we will have the previous lesson and the error is not shown anymore. So we actually have to show the previous lesson button only when we will have the previous lesson. So I'm going to add another condition right here and check if we have previous lesson, only then we have to render the previous button to avoid any kind of errors. And there you go. Anytime we're gonna be on the first lesson page, we're not going to see back button. But if we'll open up another lesson which has the previous one, we'll see that this button will be displayed. And just like you may have guessed, implementing the second accessor, which is next, will be pretty similar. So I'm gonna switch over to the lesson model, copy this method and modify it a little bit. First of all, let's rename the method name on next. And then just to get the next method, we only have to modify one thing within this method. And that is, instead of subtracting 1 to the current lesson number, we have to add 1 instead. And this way we're going to grab the next lesson. So following the same procedure, let's wrap this button into the condition where we check if the next lesson will actually exist. Only then we're going to render forward button. And we also have to assign appropriate URL address to the href attribute of this link. Let's grab this value from the first link and change only the second argument. In this case, we are supposed to reference next lesson. And eventually, let's test everything out in the Tinker first. Let's grab the first course from the database and then reference first lesson relationship to get the first lesson of this course. And when having the lesson model, we can easily reference the previous or the next lesson based on this lesson model. And everything is supposed to work in the browser as well. So on the first lesson page, we're not seeing the backward button since there is no previous lesson. And of course, those two buttons work. We can see that we can easily navigate to the previous and next lessons. But there is one styling issue, and that is whenever we're not going to have the next lesson button, we can see that those buttons that are supposed to be located on the right side are shifted to the left. So let's fix this. Back to our template and let's wrap those two buttons, previous and next, into additional div, which we're going to make flexible container. The distance between child elements in this container will be 2 units. And just to shift all the content that will come after this div element to the right side, we're going to apply a marAuto class, which is going to assign CSS property margin right with a value auto. And after this, there is no need to assign a marAuto class to the next link. Let's remove it from here. Applying a marAuto class on this link is not a good idea because sometimes this link will not exist on a page. And there you go. Now all the buttons are located in the appropriate places. Link to the source code of this project, as always, will be in the video description.